Okay, well, we're at 9 o'clock. Let's make the most of every second we have. So hello, everyone. We've got a number of people joining us today to learn, to hear about lessons learned from incubation. We've got 4 panelists. One is trying to jump in from Brazil with us today, so hopefully he'll be able to join us again soon. Welcome to the wonderful world of business incubation and acceleration. There's so many great things, but especially in the BAM space. And today we're going to hear from at least 3, possibly 4 programs and gentlemen who've been able to build those programs and hear the important things they've learned. Since we have such a short time, we're going to try to hit the highlights over the next 45 minutes or so that we have. So we're going to have each participant introduce themselves shortly, and then they're going to spend about 3 to 5 minutes talking about the things that they feel are most important for the audience to hear today about lessons learned. And after we do that, there'll be a time of question and answer from any of the participants who would like to ask questions. But also, I think we should certainly open it up for some of our participants to ask each other questions. And we're going to have a lively conversation, and I can't wait to hear what we learned today. So today, I'm going to ask Son to start us off. He's in Thailand, and we've got people spread all over the world today. So we're going to have a great, great geography selection today. So Son, a little introduction, and then talk to us about the lessons learned that you've encountered in your journey of BAM, incubation, and acceleration.
For sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. Hey, everyone, I'm Son, and I'm based in Thailand, and I'm going to be married in a couple of months. And my background is in finance and tech and ministry. So right now I'm working for the tech movement called FedTech, which is we gather a Christian tech movement. Let me share the screen. So we have some part of what we call FedTech Labs, which is, we call it like a volunteer-led tech incubator. So we try to build an ecosystem to support a tech startup ministry to disrupt and to make an impact for mission of God. Yeah. So before I the FedTech and help them to serve in the Asia region, so I have an experience in what we call Fit Incubator. We're trying to be for like what we call Christian startup, and we give away some money and we build like a meetup. We run a hackathon. Yeah, so we try to create an ecosystem to support like the Christian tech mission. Yeah, so that's me. You're on mute, Ron.
What are some important lessons in both of those ventures that you would like us to hear that might be valuable for us? So what have you learned along the way?
Yeah, sure. Let me share with the story. And I apologize if I turn my face to this screen because I have another screen here. So yeah, please don't get me wrong. I used to live in Waterloo. It's Canada province, and it's like a tech city in Canada. And that's taught me a lot of lessons, and I would love to share you all here. It's one of the most successful tech cities that they incubate a lot of startups in Canada. And it's like a role model for Canada to start a good ecosystem to start a startup. And I have a chance to live there for 4 months. And I go through like the university, I go through like the incubator hub, their accelerator, and got a lot of lessons to share you all here. Yeah, I mean, if I can give one away, like takeaway point to you all to run a successful incubator, I'm gonna say make sure you have a good ecosystem to make the business can thrive. And yeah, where I live in Waterloo, it's like they have a top university, which is called University of Waterloo. They have a good reputation for engineer. And the university, like they offer all students to, hey, if you want to start a new business, you can drop the course and then you can just start your business. If you fail, just come back to continue your course. So they really encourage people to have an entrepreneurial spirit. They have like a dorm that all students who start a business, so they stay together and make sure that they are connected, they learn from each other, and they have a good network. And then in the middle of in the downtown, they have like a incubator hub that if you want to start business, you come to pitch their idea, and then you get the table for free. You have chairs, you have space, and you can work there. And if your startup like hit the hypothesis, if you can prove that it can go, you get another funding, and then you can like move to the upper floor, and then you can like work on the next stage of your startup. And yeah, so I would say they have like a networking event every month. So they try to gather or tech people or entrepreneurs to come to meet together, get to know each other, and they really like welcome people to be fail, because like if your startup doesn't work, just go back to study. That's it. No worry. And you use like investor money. Yeah.
So let me ask you, you mentioned the need for a strong ecosystem. What are a few of the components that make a strong ecosystem?
Yes, good question. So I would say the first one, it also depends on the industry that you want to incubate them as well. For example, like because my background is in tech, so I'm gonna speak about tech industry. So if you want to have a BAM incubator for tech, I would say funding is really important, because most of tech startups, they don't have any business model yet. So they need to burn some money to prove their ideas. So make sure that the ecosystem, they have some funding, networking. So if they want to start a BAM people, they need to find another people who have a love Christ, love tech, and you need to bring them to come to get to know each other. They would be able to network with investor and another programmer, another designer. Yeah, so you need to connect them together. So I would say networking, funding, and the last one would be mentorship, because of a lot of tech people, they learn from each other, and it's really complicated industry. So it's better to have someone who has experience to teach you how to take the next step. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Wasn't Waterloo where BlackBerry was developed? The original BlackBerry device came out of Waterloo. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Son. Any final words there? I think that certainly the ecosystem is vital, and there's a lot of development in ecosystem work today around the world. Actually, incubators are starting to talk about themselves not being incubators, but being ecosystem developers. Mm-hmm. So you've got funding, networking, and mentorship. Add to that, or do you think that's the top three there?
Yeah, I would say that's the top three. And I mean, just make sure that you start incubator, not just throw money to their ideas, but make sure that they like a planting tree, and make sure they have like a good ecosystem that the tree can be thrive. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. So it's more than the idea; it's the entirety of all the nutrients that tree needs. I think that's a great metaphor. Awesome. Well, thank you, Son. We'll certainly be coming back to you to hear more. The next on the list today, we're going to hear from Brent. Brent's in Malaga today, and he's going to share a quick introduction also and some best practices from his viewpoint and lessons learned. Welcome, Brent.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Ron. So my name is Brent, and I'm the CEO of Cristar International. Our incubator is located in Malaga, Spain, and it's embedded in the Business and Innovation Center of Europe. Kind of a unique opportunity for a Christian incubator. Our history, though, starts 112 years ago, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time there, but our first missionary was Florence Drew, and she was a BAM practitioner. She took a typewriter, a talent, and a calling, and she changed entire communities in East Asia. I had the privilege of standing in a ballroom in Hong Kong in 2019, where 70 pastors gathered together to honor her legacy. And each of those pastors could trace back 100 years ago where she had started the church network that they were part of. So today, what I see for BAM incubators are that they're well positioned, and they're emerging and ready to support and develop the next generation of BAM entrepreneurs. You know, Hakan was our first speaker of the conference, and I think he has it right that it is possible to train, support, and launch practitioners. He calls his company Itsinya because it is within the individual to be an entrepreneur. You just have to know the keys to unlock it. Ron's part of INBIA, actually, and I think that's one of our greatest partners. INBIA is the International Business Incubator Association, and they do a tremendous job of helping incubators connect with one another in that larger ecosystem. And most of those incubators have what's called a soft landing program, where those that are moving overseas can go into that incubator and to learn and use local resources to launch their company in almost every country in the planet. Secondly, I do think it is our time, in the midst of the COVID financial crisis in the most vulnerable communities that we have globally, for incubation to address job creation in a major way to transform communities locally, regionally, and globally. You know, we have the mind of Christ, and consistently we've heard over these 3 days, and as that anthem that Mats introduced this week, you know, in every sphere we can transform societies for Christ. And third, for us, you know, just the involving engagement with the government. We're kind of the poster child right now for the European Commission. They continue to invite us into their projects because we have innovative ways to develop the services and that are solving the solutions in Europe and the countries around. I would say the challenge that intersects with incubation and BAM for particularly BAM practitioners in the church planting world is we need to create more pathways to seed funding at the earliest stages of startups. You know, the processes in incubation are available. We have success. We have proven formulas and information, and we have reduced the risk of investment at those early stages. And I think we need to step that up in a greater way.
Wow. Thank you, Brent. You know, Son, as he mentioned, it actually has faith in the title. And you are talking about working directly with the European Union and, you know, and the governments thereof. So how are you bringing forward the BAM or the Christian piece of what you do in the midst of what would be that secular European, you know, organization?
Well, actually, it actually gives me a benefit. I have a card in my wallet with my ID, and it says, because I'm a Protestant, it is against the law to exclude me in Europe. And so when we come to the table, they know who we are. I remember interviewing with the head of the European Business Network, and I shared my testimony, and my director of church planting was with me, and we're not going to get in. And he called me the next day and says, you guys have the best ideas on the table. Come in. And actually the European Commission gave us a grant to start our facility to be able to work in that area. And right now, currently, we're in a project, a large project, takes up 4 countries with 17 partners. And just in yesterday's meeting, again, they said, you guys are the most innovative, bringing these solutions to refugee, you know, bringing the services for refugees in Europe today.
That's good. You know, just you're mentioning the better solutions you have. It makes me think of the lean canvas, and you've got that unfair advantage box in the lean canvas. And the unfair advantage is that we've got the creator of the universe who is affording us his insight so we can be the most creative incubators out there. That's so right. I just love that the unfair advantage of BAM incubation is the creator of the universe. So that's awesome. And I want each of you to be thinking about if you could highlight an example of some of the businesses that you've worked with. I'd love to hear those stories too. So I think we'll definitely save some time for that. So, you know, keep in your mind, Son and Brent, those that you might go to there. Okay, very good. So the next person we're going to jump to, thank you, Brent, so much, is Matthew. Matthew happens to be in the U.S. today in Indianapolis, but spends a great deal of time, lives actually, I think, mostly in Kenya, and he's going to share about his organization, Synapsis, which is seen as, I would say it's seen right now as one of the models that we see in BAM incubation, top models, but certainly it's one that is reaching its goals. I mean, they've got these great goals and they're reaching them, spreading to different continents. So Matthew, if you would spend a few moments introducing yourself, and then we'd love to hear about the organization and what you've learned.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Honored to be part of the panel today. I love the unfair advantage concept there that we just hit on. That's really beautiful. It's making me smile. So synapis is an unfamiliar word to most people. It's the Latin word for mustard seed. So we believe that one of the ways that we can understand that really familiar parable. So Jesus talked about the smallest seed becoming one of the largest plants in the garden. Then he says this really interesting thing. He said, and the birds come and find rest in the branches. And one way that we see that living out in the context where we serve is when entrepreneurs that have been given a gift and they have a sense, if they're a believer, they have a sense of calling. They may not be yet a follower of Christ, but they're saying, I want to grow a company. When that is led effectively, when it becomes profitable, when it can create and sustain jobs, and especially when it's dedicated to the Lord, it mirrors that picture of employees and the people who depend on those jobs and communities finding rest, finding shalom. So that's really what we seek to do. I'm going to share my screen, see if this, can you see this okay?
Yes, it's up.
Fantastic. So real briefly, just to try to give you a little bit of a visual on this, we're growing what we believe is part of a global movement seeking to serve local entrepreneurs that we believe God has prepared to change the world. So that's one of the things I'm going to hit on in lessons learned, but we think it's a paradigm shift to look at how can we come and be a servant to the unbelievable men and women that have been given this gift of launching and scaling companies that can grow, that can create, sustain jobs, and have that kind of impact in a community. So we blend very intensive training and ongoing advisory services with very intentional integration on what does it mean to lead a company for Christ. Again, if you're not a follower of Jesus, so we serve people who have deep commitments to him or none, but we're very open and honest about who we are. But what's it mean to consider leading that company with excellence for the kingdom? And then as they're going along that path, to provide a vision and then very practical tools to support what does a social and a spiritual impact look like in that company. This is just a brief history. We started in Nairobi, Kenya in 2010. By God's grace now, we've served almost 6,000 emerging market entrepreneurs through workshops and programs, had almost 1,300 people graduate from these programs. And then in our accelerator, which is a very hands-on support for 6 months for the highest potential companies each year. We've had about 70 people go through that. This is just a quick picture because one of the needs that we have is we're always looking to see, are there partner organizations or others around the world who feel called to a similar journey that we may be able to serve. And so we directly manage programs in Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda in East Africa. And then we have partnerships in these other markets, Ghana, Brazil, Liberia, Egypt, Burundi, and actually most recently have launched in Mongolia. Haven't updated that yet on the slide. So let me just hit a couple of key lessons learned. I think for all of us, the hard part here is there are so many. We've done some things well. We've made lots of mistakes. We're happy to talk about that in Q&A. But number one is what I was hinting at earlier, entrepreneurs by choice. So one of our key convictions is we want to serve people who are saying, again, either they may not be a believer and they're just saying, I want to grow a company, or if they're a follower of Christ, they might use language like, I feel called to do this. This is a spiritual calling. So we want to build the capacity and accelerate entrepreneurs like this. And what we've seen in our impact data is when the right individuals get the skill building that they need, and then they continue on their journey, they do amazing things. They've created over 5,000 jobs in our network. They're growing their company. So this is as of December 31 at 37% compound annual growth rate in revenue. Pre-COVID, that was just under 50% for the last 3 years. We think one of the real key ideas here is local entrepreneurs who want to scale and grow profitable companies. Second key lesson learned is capacity building before capital. So in the markets where we work, 9 countries, all in the emerging frontier world, when you talk to entrepreneurs, most of the time they will say, what I really just need is capital. If I had that loan, if I had access to an equity partner, my idea is great. I know all that I need to know, That's the thing that's missing. And we respectfully, typically don't agree with that perspective. We usually believe there is capital waiting in that market or internationally, but there are gaps in either the entrepreneur's skills or in the business model. And so we believe that thematically where we serve, if we can provide training programs, acceleration, and then what I'm going to talk about on the next point, it can help early stage, growth stage entrepreneurs get to a place where capital can then be deployed really effectively. Third key lesson learned is the importance, which has already been highlighted in the discussion so far, of ongoing community. So as much as we're excited about, we have 3 major programs that we implement, and we've got great data to indicate that they're successful. But the journey of an entrepreneur, if you think about the economic component of that journey, the social part of that journey, the spiritual part of that journey, is a lifelong thing. And so ultimately, to see multi-generational change, we believe that connecting people in community, starting to harness the human, social, spiritual capital that God is stirring up in each market is the greatest opportunity for long-term economic and spiritual change. And then lastly, I've thrown out a couple of data points, and I heard this in an earlier session today from another group, and I just wholeheartedly agree. Having a clear theory of change and then a monitoring and evaluation system is really important for improving operations and being able to demonstrate impact. So every course that we run, we do a baseline when we first begin to work with an entrepreneur. We have weekly feedback surveys, which are largely meant to point to, did you understand what you learned that day? Was it practical? Again, all of this is meant to be applied in a business. It's not leading to papers or exams or things like that. And then was the training done with excellence? Did the trainer do their part effectively that week? So we do the baseline, we do the weekly survey, and then we have an end line in that course. And then most importantly, we have a longitudinal impact survey that we offer across the global network. And I want to celebrate what our staff did this past year. We had 55% of our almost 1,300 entrepreneurs participate in that, which really helps us see what's working well, what's not, how do we refine, and then more broadly, how do we talk about these amazing people that God is using to bring this kinds of change. So I'm going to stop there, but those are a few of the key lessons that we feel like God's been teaching us.
Awesome. Thank you. Wow, wonderful to hear what is happening across the board for all of you. So I just noticed that I didn't even introduce myself. So I'll just put that in real quick, and then we'll get to some questions. I'm currently a professor of entrepreneurship in Arkansas, in the United States. I've been doing this about 6 years. But before that, I was able to start and run business incubators in the state of Oklahoma and was director of a technology park as well for a time. So I've got a lot of history in that area and just love what happens in incubation as a whole. So something I heard throughout all of your discussions was this idea of the networking and the support, the mentorship. And it made me think of the idea of pre-incubation. Matthew mentioned, 6,000 plus people, many of them who've gone through what I would be the education or training side. And I'd like to ask Son and Brent also, how much of what you do is that capacity building, as Matthew called it, that pre-incubation where you're building capacity in the ecosystem and the network before you're launching a business? How important is that in each of your organizations? Son, would you start?
Would you mind, Brent, if I pass to Brent go first?
Oh, that's fine.
Sure. So make sure I heard you right. Well, how do we build the ecosystem for the entrepreneurs before we actually begin to onboard companies and take them through our process, right?
My point in asking is there are some incubators that only incubate. They only take in a company that they're ready to begin the launch process. And there's not a lot of what I would call the pre-incubation, where you're just teaching people about entrepreneurship in general. You're helping them to see the possibilities and even helping to change mindsets. So it's kind of that area that I'm interested to hear how you guys approach. Okay, so ours would be, taking the whole ideation process, right? That someone would come to us. They would first go through a personal evaluation, to look at
what is on their plate that they would need to take off to implement this idea or this company that they would have. We call it the personal development part of it, and it's right up front. There's a sort of the first session is more, okay, these are some of the elements you need to be thinking, and then session 2 and 3 turn into more of a, okay, what is your capacity, and then what support do you need? Identifying, is this someone with some experience in this field or with this product, and it's an easy exchange for them, or is it something that they need to really sit back and do some research first to understand the market, or we can actually, because of our network with the European Business Network, actually do some market research analysis at the beginning to see if their product and their market that they're thinking actually match, right? One example would be a woman that came through our process, and she had a clothing manufacturing idea, and she had an area that she wanted to deliver that. And very quickly we identified that she could not have a cheap enough product to compete in that market. So then we redid her idea, and now she's running a very successful design company for clothing in the location that she wanted.
Okay, great. Thank you. Son, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, like, in ideation stage for us, because we don't have much capacity to train these people that we are incubating, so we decided to go with a strategy that we will pick the right person before invest in them. So we make sure that we interview with them. We ask them about, like, ideation stage. That do they understand about the product market fit? Do they what is their market? How do they gonna sustain the product and something like that? And then we make sure that we invest with the right person. And once we're gonna onboard them, we're gonna ask them to, hey, would you mind set the metrics that gonna prove that your product is fit to the market? So that can be like active users, that can be whatever that the founder, the entrepreneur said. But we make sure we follow up with the metrics, and then we move them from the pre-early stage and then move them to the next step. Yeah.
Okay, great. So what I'm hearing a little bit is that an important thing in being a successful incubator is picking the right clients that you eventually incubate, and you're doing that at the front by taking them through some of these assessments and helping them to figure out the best place for them to fit. So you're actually helping them to see that their product practically and reasonably it's just not a good fit, and you're guiding them to something else that might be. So that's something that traditional. Yeah, go ahead, Matthew.
I'm sorry, I was just gonna say, can I jump in, because that's something that
please,
we were not doing enough of. So it was one of the I think mistakes, and it's been a correction. So I think what Son and Brent said is exactly right. Looking at the different segments in the market. So we serve now the idea stage, we have the early to growth stage, post-revenue companies, and their needs are really different. And then the acceleration, I think, is more of what you were talking about, where you have a business that is pretty established and it needs really hands-on assessment. It needs to create a custom roadmap. Particularly a couple of years ago, so our flagship program is a mini MBA, takes MBA level content, and then we contextualize, make it really practical. But we had early stage companies coming into that. It's really hard to hypothesize about customer development or building out your financial model when you're not selling anything yet. And so what we did, you referenced Lean Canvas or Business Model Canvas, we went and added a program for entrepreneurs at that stage, which we think most of those in the frontier markets are at the earlier idea stage. So they're being guided to figure out really practically, could this become a viable business? And now the post-revenue companies go through that academy where then they can take those MBA level tools and apply it in something that's really practical. And so we were making a mistake, I think, in not having enough clarity in that. And we're still working toward really nice definition of how do you have cohorts, and how do you make sure this really is the highest impact at the different phases?
Thank you, Matthew. Long-term, and there's been some long-term research on what makes all incubators successful. And one of the key points is that you incubate the right companies. And the reason incubators are successful is because they find the right companies to incubate. And if someone's not a good fit, if if they're not willing to be part of the program, if there's not a clear path, reasonably path to commercialization, then it's kind of a waste of time to incubate them. It's not that we don't help them and maybe help them learn more about entrepreneurship, but if we spend our time incubating them for something that really has a high potential for failure, that's not a good use of resources mostly. So I'm really glad to hear the way all of you are looking at that. Matthew mentioned frontier. He mentioned the word frontier, and there's a couple questions in the chat right now about urban versus smaller environments. So Heather M has asked, she mentions that many incubators are in urban areas and innovation hubs. She's asking, is it possible to incubate in a more distributed environment or smaller cities? And then Matthew, or Kevin was also asking Matthew about, are you working only in urban centers? So all of you, I'd like you to address the idea of working both in rural versus urban environments. So who would like to start? Hey, Matthew, you're not muted, so why don't you start?
Okay. I think there's two dimensions to the answer for us. So when we started, Nairobi, Kenya was exclusively where we served for the first 6 to 7 years. So we were trying to refine the model. It's probably another lesson learned, is we were not wanting to replicate until we felt pretty comfortable with where we had been. So as we began to look at international partnerships, we also realized there are close to 50 million people in Kenya. What are some of the kind of tier 2 cities that we could begin to expand to? So pre-COVID, we started to do that. So places like Mombasa and Thika and Kisumu, and if you're familiar with Kenya. So, we're now in about the top 5 cities. There do tend to be some different challenges with that. But then the second piece of it is with COVID, we had to pivot, and I imagine this has been true for everyone, all of our training, alumni support, acceleration to digital delivery. So now that we're figuring this out, which had been on our longer term strategic list of things we wanted to explore, but that became a 5-week window of needing to solve for that. We think one of the upsides is if people in rural environments, who I again will come back to, who want to grow and scale a company, because that's who we're designed to serve, and they have the bandwidth that will allow them to connect into the learning management system and into the calls, we think that's one of the most exciting things that's in front of us here. We still want to be cohort based. We think accountability and community is essential to transformation. So we're not going to try to become Coursera, where it's great content, but you often don't have that connection. So those have been a couple of things. I could talk about what we've done well, what we haven't, if there's more interest, but I'll stop there for now.
Do you have and not with any of your partners, but do you yourself have a threshold that we're not going to go into a city below X number of people, with an in-person program? Do you have anything like that?
It's not quite that concrete, but I think in practice it does look like. So one of the things, so we're looking at demographics, we're looking at educational backgrounds. So for Synapis, this is not a screen, but 95% of those we serve have a college degree or a post-grad degree. Okay. Again, we're not looking at that saying that has to be true in order for someone to be successful, but because it's MBA level engagement, that tends to be the fit of those who want to come and serve us. So when you start to layer those things in, it paints a picture for engagement in different environments. But again, it's not a rigid, if the population's not this, if you don't have universities of this caliber or anything like that. And everyone's trying to figure this out because the rural challenges of poverty are so extreme. And we've actually got a new project that we could talk about offline if somebody wants to try to move into some counties in Kenya that don't have this kind of support.
Okay. So Matthew mentioned something that I would like to throw out as a lesson learned just in general incubation, is that the models can be very different, but the success tends to travel with those who stay true to their mission. You can pick a mission and a clientele and be more successful when you're focused. So Matthew mentioned his focus on the educated generally, and those that are highly motivated to grow and scale. But someone else may be very motivated on job creation only, or even ecosystem development. And they can have an extremely successful incubation program as long as they stay true to that mission. If you have a lot of mission drift, you do get bogged down and you don't see the results. I worked in generally rural incubators for most of my time, and rural in the U.S. for me would be a city of 50,000 or less, maybe 60,000. So I had a lot of success, but we had a very defined mission, and I just heard Matthew's defined mission as well. Son, can you talk about whether you do any work in the rural areas and maybe even the focus of your mission?
Yeah, sure. I chose to silent at first because, let me say like this, because my background is in technology. So yeah, my view, my worldview will be about tech business. I do personally think that most of tech incubator, they're based in the city, because as I told before that the ecosystem is really important. And if you live in like rural area, it's hard to find co-working, it's hard to find investor, it's hard to find another developers to join your team. That's challenging for sure. And yeah, so that's why most of tech incubator, they sit together, just make sure they stay close to each other. But I'm gonna say like this as well, like I saw the comment from Richard as well, that even you live in the rural area, you can get the incubator from the urban area, and that's right. And I see the trend of like everything go remote right now. So I mean, if you're in tech, it's easily to work remotely, and you can just like jump into the incubator in the city and then work with the market in the rural area. So I just talk two sides of the coin, which is like one way the ecosystem is really important, but it's gonna not be that important because the pandemic shifted that we can go like fully remote. But yeah, that's my opinion from tech industry.
I'm sorry, Brent. I was actually just calling on you, Brent. Say, what would you say? What would you add to that, Brent?
I think in the area what we're learning, we have two focus really. One is preparing BAM practitioners that are being launched globally, and so they're going to different places around the world, and that's kind of our calling. But our success with using the It's India process, the underserved is where like the European Commission and cities around Europe are asking us to be involved, because we are helping other incubators in our network to engage that community, which wouldn't darken their doors. So we go into the refugee hubs, and in Maderna, it's a very rural place in Spain. And while the incubator there focuses on that, when they need particular expertise for a particular product or industry, the ANCES, ANCES network in Spain of incubators is very strong, and they can identify another expert, to work remotely, like San said, with that individual or that company as it develops.
Great. Let me see if I have any other questions here.
One more thing I would add.
Yeah, go ahead, Matthew.
So this, because what I shared might be perceived narrowly. Part of our theory of change is we ultimately believe that those that have the gifts and the skills and the drive to grow profitable companies are going to create jobs that employ the poor. They're going to build a local economy. So the mission of our organization is to make disciples of Christ and alleviate poverty through the power of entrepreneurship. And so that link for us is really important. It takes time, but that's what we're trying to foster. So it's not an interest in incubation, acceleration, capacity building as an end to itself. It's, we think these are the people that create and sustain jobs that make life really different for those that are most marginalized and are suffering. And frankly, I think don't want to shoulder the burden of being an entrepreneur. I think in every culture, most people would rather have a steady job than try to figure out, how do I innovate? How do I continue to compete? And if that's true, that's why we have the focus on the group that we do. Yeah.
Wow, thank you for adding that. And Matthew also added something in the chat. I'll direct some people to go look at as well with the chat that we've been doing there. It's just come up in a little more discussion is that the spiritual side, because the thing that makes BAM incubation different from others is that additional goal of the spiritual life, discipleship, making Christ known in the nation. So if each of you would address how that plays out in each of your programs, we'd love to hear that. So let's start with Brent on this one, and then we'll go to San and then Matthew.
Yeah, well, some people uneasy because we are very open about our faith, and that we are a mission organization that is seeking to reach people and work with people. As I mentioned in my introduction, so in Europe we have a special opportunity because the entities cannot exclude us from participating, and then when we get in that space, time and time again we win. With a project called Easy Rights, which is developing an artificial intelligence tool for that Amazon has given us the technology to be able to help refugees know that their rights, and be able to access asylum processes. Well, our customer is actually the European government. We're helping. We are incubating and developing their product with them for launch in every city in Europe. And the idea is that the product will be the customer. The customer of the product is other governments that will embrace this artificial intelligence tool to help other types of people, other underserved people. So it's a challenge, and sometimes you have to learn how to operate in that area. But very often, the head of the ANSES and the chairman of EBN, they both call me their pastor, and they are non-believing, people. So, yeah. But when crisis happens in their lives, we're the people that they call, and that we open the Bible with them and pray with them and pray for them and pray in front of them. And it's I've not had anyone in this say no to praying for them, and then they ask, why did you do that? Then you tell them your testimony, and they don't say, oh no, I don't believe that didn't happen to you. So I think it opens up great channels for us.
Wow. Thanks, Brent, for sharing that so much. What an inspiration. The pastor, the marketplace pastor. I love that. All right, San.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah, for us, we call ourselves faith tech. So we make sure that everyone knows when they work with us that we are faith, and it's the faith in Jesus. So yeah, we have a lot of stories that even some non-Christian people, they join the team, and then they will disciple while they're working with us, and then we work with them as well. And most of our projects are for local church, for marginalized people, and for evangelism. So I mean, basically our idea is we incubate the projects that really direct to the mission. And yeah, that's pretty straightforward. So that's from me.
Yeah, I love the fact that it's right in your name. Yeah, it is in your name. We are Faith Tech. I love that. Thank you, San. All right, so we've only got a couple minutes left, and we'll let Matthew kind of round this out.
Yeah, so I mentioned real briefly earlier, in our mission, we want to make disciples of Christ and alleviate poverty through the power of entrepreneurship. So we are both trying to engage in relationship with entrepreneurs to introduce them to Jesus if they don't know him. More often, especially in East Africa, though we have partners now in Egypt and Mongolia and other markets that are more restricted to the gospel. And so there's going to be different ways of engaging. But more often people come and they say, I'm a follower of Jesus, but I want to grow into leading a business for the kingdom. So if I can share my screen one more time, I want to celebrate what God is doing through them. Let's see if this came up. Can you see this slide okay?
It's opening now. Yes, here we go.
So this is a part of the monitoring and evaluation that we do. So when we introduce kingdom business frameworks and entrepreneurs in training have the opportunity, we certainly don't force them to create a spiritual integration plan that lives right alongside their business plan. These are some of the things that they're doing. 82% are launching spiritual or social impact programs in their community. 68% report that they actively are integrating their faith into their business. And again, these are all local entrepreneurs who want to grow and scale profitable companies. 72% are refusing to participate in corruption. An interesting thing about that statistic, if they come into our data and they've already made a firm commitment to always live with integrity, we don't include them in that number. So that 72 is of those that admit, sometimes I pay bribes, sometimes I receive bribes. So it's a testament to the power of the word and the power of the Holy Spirit and the community that's coming around them. Most importantly, 38% are reporting that someone is coming to faith in Christ through their kingdom business. So for us, we think the opportunity that people have to live that out naturally as they are going, like the Great Commission says, is this unbelievable way over time and through relationship for these really special men and women we get to serve to have huge spiritual impact. And we believe that they are.
Wow. Thank you, Matthew. Man, I wish we had another hour to do this because we didn't even get into the stories, and that's often the most inspirational piece. But some takeaways for me is the need for better metrics, whether it be metrics on the business side or the social and spiritual impact metrics. I think that's very important. And I just want to direct everyone back to that idea of the unfair advantage that we have in this process is the fact that the Holy Spirit is with us as we are out there walking with people as they go so that we can make disciples along the way and build economic systems that support people's livelihoods. And it's awesome. So I encourage everyone who joined us today. We had consistently over 30 people in our session to meet up with each other. If you'd like to visit with any one of us who might also be in the conference, send us an individual chat or an invitation to visit. And I want to thank Son and Brent and Matthew. And I wish everyone could have heard Paulo. He couldn't get on because of some technology issues. But the world of BAM incubation is alive and well, and it's continuing to grow. And God bless everyone today. Thanks.